Good evening. I want to thank you all for being here and thank Jonathan for abbreviating his introduction because we have a lot to cover. And I also want to thank Jonathan for making this evening possible because it means a lot to be here on the stage at the 92nd Street Y always, and especially during New York City Jewelry Week. And I hear rumors we even have Bella Nyman with us tonight, and that who's one of the founders of New York City Jewelry Week. And to get on Bella's schedule is always a coup because it's packed, so I feel that is a feather in our cap already. And I also want to welcome the figure drawing class from the Tisch School of the Arts. I know that you're here as guests of your teacher, who is on stage with me, and normally you would be in class, but I think you're going to have quite a bit of drawing from these two artists this evening. So I am absolutely overjoyed to be on this stage with Kate and Christopher. We are going to get into as many ways as we can squeeze in this evening about how they created a visual narrative through costumes and jewelry. You're going to see details of this jewelry, that it is not just a beautiful accessory that goes on top of the costumes. It is part of the storytelling. And one of the reasons why I wanted to play this video is because it has Guillermo del Toro in it. It's always a plus. I think I've watched as much as I possibly could of him speaking because he is really amazing and the visionary behind this movie. And we also have Mia Goth in the video, who we're going to be focusing on tonight with her jewelry. And there's been a lot of great movies in the history of cinema that have had wonderful jewelry in it, but it is, never in my career really have I heard a director speak about jewelry the way Guillermo del Toro does, and I'm going to be quoting from him liberally in my notes all night, so, having his presence with us. And so he talks, there is a companion piece that you can watch on Netflix right now called Anatomy Lesson, which is behind the scenes of the movie. And Guillermo talks about how the different departments, costume, set, and cinematography, all are of a whole message for the movie. And Kate's costume department had a subdivision, which was really a Tiffany jewelry department, with Christopher and the Tiffany archives. And not only did Christopher open up the vaults to have Kate and work on new jewels with Kate, which we're going to get into, Christopher and his team went on location to Scotland, not for a day, not for a week, but for a very long time. So before we get into all of that, Kate, I would like you to take us back to the beginning. If I can,
many years ago.
If I can advance the slide, it would be useful. There we go. To the beginning and talk to us just about the process, about where does your process begin and how do you move into developing a character like Elizabeth?
Well, Guillermo has talked for many, many years, I think since he was 5 years old, about doing Frankenstein. And, he mentioned, a year or 2 years before the project even started, he mentioned he was doing Frankenstein. So obviously I went back to the book. I mean, Mike and Mike Hill, will know every film. He knows the James Whale and all of those films. But for me, the book was the place I started. And what I loved when I received Guillermo's script was that all those themes and feelings that are present in the book, the feeling of melancholy, this layers of memory, nature being part and present of the journey of the creature and the world itself, that was still present in the script. But then Guillermo, it's his version of Frankenstein, and so the layers of mythology, religion, and nature, found its way into the themes and imagery of the script in his unique language. So that became the sort of, the main points that we used as an arc throughout the storytelling, and we built on those. So with colour and imagery, the first scene of the creation of the creature is like Christ on the cross, and then you see, we even had a scene of Mia in the convent at the beginning. So all of these images sort of repeated, and he uses that a lot within our departments. Marion alluded to how we all work, and Guillermo always tells me that I'm the set, and he tells the production designer that she's the costume or that the lighting is. And that's how we work together to complete the image of colour and texture and light. We're all answering and creating a balance under Guillermo, who's almost like a conductor in this case. He almost conducts the piece and we're all the elements within it, or his lieutenants. And we work that way with colour and everything. So then when we were then it became more about this moment. I don't know how long to spend on that, because that's a long project.
No, but I did want to mention, because you sent us one of these images of the Caravaggio as well, with about light.
Yes, and colour. So when we're talking about colour, Guillermo brought up the Caravaggio as a big reference point. There's the colour red, and the sort of tones of a romantic tragedy, and actually for me, when I was seeing the lighting that Dan was creating with Guillermo, the way the creature's skin is lit, Guillermo wanted this creature to be, that Victor was an artist, and I know I'm speaking for Mike, so please excuse me if I misquote him, but he looked at a lot of 18th century and 17th century wax medical figures. So the creature that you see, all the skin tones, and that comes from trying to do this beautiful classical, Guillermo calls it a Porsche rather than a crapped out old car. So, he's not building something that's sort of put in sort of broken stitches and that. He's trying to build this thing of beauty. And that was kind of the language throughout, that there's always this theme of Guillermo's work, that there's, an ugliness underneath the beauty of things, or that there's a beauty underneath the ugliness. And that's, a theme that we're always working together with him on. It's a repeated thing. So the colour of Caravaggio and that tone of a romantic tragedy, that sort of dark tragedy, is very much his tone for Frankenstein.
Right.
I would say.
Yeah, and so we're going to go deep on this look in one moment, but I mean, before you kind of get together when you're just sketching out your ideas for something like this, and you have a reference image here, I mean, where does this start? Where the research is off the charts. It's
I like
going to
research.
get really obscure in a minute. Yeah, and I mean, we're looking at the Countess Castiglione.
It was brilliant. I love her. I wish we could do a film on her. And I do start with a normal process of research. I went to a wonderful school called Motley Theatre Design, and I learned a process. And obviously, Guillermo made a very specific decision to move it from the 18th century and the Age of Enlightenment and set it within the 1850s, and with the backdrop of the Crimean War, where he wanted a sort of more modern sensibility, where technology was changing, the way people looked at medical and surgical. Tiffany's were working in the Civil War, developing. He knew that. He came to you with that, didn't he? And so he wanted this more modern context, and we had two different time periods, and really Victor's childhood sort of alludes to the Age of Enlightenment. We cheated it. I mean, this is the world that we're building. Yes, it starts with historical, but once you realise that this is the dream of the world, that this is sort of an operatic, melodramatic world that Guillermo's creating, then you let that go. I kept to the silhouettes, but within that it was about storytelling. And he said he wanted colour. He didn't want seas of black hats, and he didn't want the Dickensian Victorian aspect. So what was important then was to sort of, and he said, I want intense colour. And we talked about Hammer horror films, the world of Mario Bava, and looking at colour, how to explore that in a way that still answers to the sort of gothic melancholy tone. That was a big part of the world. And we have such an amazing canvas, particularly for Mia, with that Victorian silhouette and the big crinoline. It was just asking to be played with. And we, throughout I was already mirroring and playing with themes of anatomy, that even the insects' anatomy are part of that. The sort of organic forms of nature, blood cells, cells within nature itself. So all of those images I started playing with, and looking at the stones and all of the world that's part of her world. Mia's character Elizabeth, there's a beautiful line in the book where, in the film, where she's in the bistro scene with Victor, and she's bought books at the market, and one of them's William Paley's Theology of Nature. And that's really the heart of her sort of idiosyncratic approach to religion. It's where the beauty and wonder of God is in nature. And so that's the language that sort of echoed everything that we were looking at. And do you want me to talk about this one?
No, I'm hold that thought.
Racing away. Sorry.
No, it's perfect. And I'm gonna get you two together as a union. These are creative soulmates here on the stage with me. And but before you met, I mean, Tiffany has, of course, this extraordinary history, which we all know and love, of being in the movies, with Breakfast at Tiffany's on top, and there's even the contemporary rom-coms that we all love, which use the 57th Street landmark. We have Sleepless in Seattle, and The Great Gatsby is great literature brought to screen. But yet, Christopher, you mentioned this in the video, when Catherine van der Veen of Creatology, who is the great liaison person between movie productions and jewelry houses, passed the script or the idea even of Frankenstein to you, you thought,
Fell off your chair, didn't you?
I don't know.
You didn't reply to the phone call. No.
Well, I think actually it started with Steve Newman, who is the head of the photo studio at Netflix. And I think that you were showing him the previous drawing of...
I think I was having a hissy fit going, I've got no jewellery. The budget was drying up, already. It doesn't take long for these things to happen. It was like, do I have to go to the market and create whatever? I mean, you always have to be creative in this business. But Steve said, I think I know a way in here.
And Steve's very good friends with Catherine. And I've worked with Catherine since 2012 on The Great Gatsby and many other projects. So it was normal for her to reach out, because since then we've always asked each other whenever we got together, what's the next big film moment for Tiffany? And when she texted me and said Frankenstein, honestly, she'll tell you, I don't think I even texted back. I texted back.
She did say that, she did.
I said, how am I, because I adore her, so I thought, how am I gonna, get around this one? Because she is quite persistent. That's why she's so good at what she does. But I will say that in my mind...
Was it a phone call?
It was a text. But it's fine. I mean, we're always texting, constantly. But the thing is that I was picturing Boris Karloff. I think it's very normal. No one had seen this beautiful world that you constructed under Guillermo's vision. I didn't know it was going to be this Gothic fairy tale, that love would play such a strong role, that romance would be so involved in the script. We think of the James Whale version of Frankenstein, and we forget that it's a woman's film, written by a woman. And so it was with patience, I met with Catherine, and she said, just meet Kate Hawley and let her show you one drawing.
But I feel like before that happened, I have the backstory here. Christopher went very academic, which he
That's true. So, okay. Well, so research, we all love research, right? We love research, and at Tiffany, we have an incredible archives. And I thought, well, are there some parallels? So I looked at our founder, Charles Louis Tiffany, who founded Tiffany and Company in 1837. And I realized this portrait of him...
Lovely waistcoat.
Lovely. Well, you can use that for reference. And this portrait of Mary Shelley were painted at the same time. And if you look, it almost looks like a married couple.
It does.
And so I thought, you know what? There is the foundation for us.
The Ariana Grande, Cynthia Erivo moment.
Oh my God. Things have really grown between us.
Creative soulmates.
So I thought, let's start. I'm going to meet with Kate Hawley. I knew her work from Crimson Peak, and I thought, okay, let's start at least with the period. I knew that we had jewelry from the 1837. We had very early pieces from the mid 19th century. I thought we could start there. Going through the script, there were several funerals. Big scenes.
Love a funeral.
We love a funeral, so I thought, let's get out the mourning jewelry. That's something that we typically don't show in our stores. And,
You have it in blue, don't you?
And then at the end of, and the last thing, and of course the Tiffany Archives is led by Christina Vignoni, who's the director of the archives, and she did a phenomenal job selecting pieces. And we also, it was Christina who said, what was really fashionable in the late 19th century was insect jewelry. I'll let you advance to the next slide.
So Christopher and Kate met, and it was love at first sight. It was love at first creative sight, and we were done with morning jewelry pretty quickly, were we not?
Well, it has a place in the film.
It comes up briefly.
Yeah, but it was a starting point. It was like, okay, well, what's the side of Tiffany we haven't seen before? Yeah. Because if it's going to work for Frankenstein, I know there's a wedding scene, but this is not about the Tiffany setting. So,
No, and for me, looking at, pardon my ignorance here, because this jewelry world is a whole new rabbit hole I've gone into. So forgive my ignorance. But when I saw the stained glass windows, the lampshades, and actually saw the undulating dimensions of them, they're not. I've been grown up around a whole lot of really terrible reproductions, little Pinky Sylvanian family sort of shit, and when you see the light within it, the amount of layers of light, they paint with light, it's not, there's no blacks, there's blues and purples, blues and greens, and it was answering what we were doing within our department, exploring the colorways, how we use dye, layering of colors and fabric. So. And can I just tell them that story you told me about Louis Comfort Tiffany in Arcadia? My farm's also called Arcadia. But he told me this beautiful story about the workroom, the studio, with Mette Overbeck and Julia Muntz. And Louis Comfort Tiffany had this, it was a room full of natural objects as creative inspiration.
That's right. And, on this slide, I have to draw attention to the image on the upper right-hand corner. It's an image of Louis Tiffany's studio in the family home. It's this, 45-foot height ceiling with these, chains hanging from the ceiling with glass creations. On the second floor, there's a pipe organ, and he's really obsessed with recreating nature. He's obsessed with trying to find these effects in glass and in ceramics and the various media in which he excelled in the end. And I thought this obsession with recreating nature is a wonderful parallel for Victor Frankenstein.
And also, Guillermo was the first to say he's also Victor Frankenstein, and he's also the creature, in case you ever get the two confused. He's also William, and he's also Elizabeth. Yeah. He's all of those things. But that very expression of nature and that process is very much how we work with him in the different departments.
Completely. And I had this written down because Guillermo said it when I was lucky enough to be in his presence during the special Tiffany screening of the movie. And he said, I have great admiration for Tiffany because of how they were involved in the scientific discoveries in the 1800s, how they did alchemy with glass, investigating the possibilities of materials all the time, just like we do. Yeah. Which I think is in the studio. And then I just want to, sorry, I'm assuming the audience, I was about to say, everyone here knows the Favril glass scarabs from Tiffany. Do you want to explain the Favril glass scarabs? Just briefly.
Happy to. I mean,
and I'm going to go to the next slide because this is really a mind-blowing piece of ephemera from your archives.
So Favril has a kind of broad term, but the sort of luster glass that was created at that time, and that's one of the definitions of Favril. I know Ben Macklow's here; he'll correct me if I get it wrong. But I have to point out that the scarabs were quickly something that Kate arrived to, knowing that it was important to Elizabeth. Right?
Well, and even Guillermo described Elizabeth as insect-like, and so we were looking at the iridescent fabrics. That was something we were looking at, how to create those effects. And so then when we see this little thing, it was perfect answer.
So what we're looking at is the first Tiffany Blue Book that features Favril scarab jewelry in 1908. And you're seeing the entry, you see the various types of jewelry that was created at that time. These were overseen by Mette Overbeck, a genius who was in a very high creative, important role. Overseeing the art jewelry department under Louis Tiffany, and she is responsible for much of what you see. Julia Munson, who was the previous director of the art jewelry department, also started doing some scarab jewelry, but we attribute these to Mette Overbeck. This photograph I had to include because this is a 1914 photograph of the necklace that Mia Goth wears in the film. And we had this photo in the archives, and we have the necklace as well.
I think one of the, just not to interrupt this, but I have, because there's so many feelings, I mean, when I first saw the archive, and it's really terrible, that feature, because you can hear me going, I was crying, because I haven't seen all of that, you know, to see an artist's hand in the work. And one of the other things that really drew us to this work was that you're used to seeing jewellery confined within more traditional styles like garland and things contained. But when you look at the work of Mette Overbeck and in those drawings and paintings, it's always breaking the boundaries. You know, it's always shifting. Yeah.
And there's a simplicity. Certainly there were others making jewelry with scarabs or Egyptian revival, but it's, you know, very Art Nouveau. You know, there's a modernity to the Tiffany jewelry from 1914 that allows you to wear it now, and it also expresses those same timeless attributes that we love about Tiffany jewelry today. So, you know, we're proud to express where we were at that time. And, you know, and that's why Frankenstein ended up being a wonderful project for us, because we were never talking about that part of our history.
And I think that another extraordinary point of this paperwork in front of us is that you see the Favril beetle jewelry, and then you see a list of items. This necklace was not the only necklace. This was something that was a collection that people wore. And, you know, I like this idea because it says, you know, we look at Elizabeth as this character, and I'm about to finally get to Elizabeth. Here she is. And you know, it seems a little bit perhaps like it might have been an eccentricity, but it's a fact that this was a type of person too. So she has that kind of fact behind the fantasy.
And even the imagery, so we've got the circle on the right, and all the imagery Guillermo's using that you see very prominently in the work that Tamara did in the production design is the language of circles. And you see that in the shape of the Medusa, and you see it in the shape of the windows, and it's repeated all the time. Even the story of colour is a circle. We start at the beginning with Mother and the red veil, and we end with the bride dying and the red bleeding out. So the circle language is also part of the mythology as well. It's a big part of the language.
For sure. And I have to point out, you know, we're looking at the photograph of the necklace. We're seeing it being worn. We just looked at the photograph when that necklace was made in 1914. To think that then that piece would be on Mia Goth in this spectacular.
Fitting perfectly, by the way.
Fit her absolutely. We did not require any adjusting at all. We were prepared. We didn't need to do it. And to think that it's worn on one of the greatest films by one of the greatest filmmakers of our time, I think that just, you know, it's humbling to know that was the journey of that jewel.
This was really one of the first images that dropped from the film before it was released, and I don't think it's an exaggeration to say everyone was pretty shook, you know, when they saw this ensemble come out. And what we know now is that it wasn't just a beautiful dress and an incredible headpiece, an amazing necklace, but you were putting all kinds of layers into the costume.
Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about...
in this piece, which we see at the beginning, again with the idea of circle motif and that, the feathered headdress was almost echoing, you know, the world of angels, or, you know, Michelangelo, that kind of, you know, the circle language. And then we were playing with the idea of anatomy and using that as an idea to sort of, it also echoed Victorian damask, but we were doing something that was unique to the storytelling. And, you know, one of the big things in the conversation, because everything that I do is affected by light, and Dan and Guillermo at the beginning said we're going to use single source lighting and we're going to use everything with candlelight. We all go, great. 101 camera tests later. It's like different candles, the size of the wax, and there's this huge candle thing that went on. And in the end, Dan Lausner, who's so wonderful, set up a little lab for us. He put in lighting. And this dress, I think, was actually shot at almost towards the very end of the film when we were in the UK. And we started at an obvious place with more saturated coloured silks, but it died under the lighting. And so we played with light, a bit like you do with glass and paint and dye, with building up lots of layers. There's actually lots of grey in this dress. We, you it took quite a lot of R&D, and then all of these are sort of layers and layers of X-rays overlaid over each other. You've even got a skull in the fan. So, and then we use fractal patterns as part of the language. So it was all to give her a more elemental part in this world and to create that more ephemeral quality that Guillermo wanted.
It's so beautiful.
This is work in progress in the workroom there, yeah.
And then there's the image where we see all the light, and now you can see some of what you were doing with X-rays.
Which was actually going to be a late evening dinner scene. This is what happens in film. And then it's like, oh, the light's so beautiful, let's make it late afternoon. So, we have to let go of some of the sort of observations of what a woman of that period would be dressing at that time. But it's in the world that Guillermo's creating, and he...
I know we were all blown away with how well the necklace matched the fabrics. It's like a Favril glass necklace.
Everything was a fairy tale moment, wasn't it?
It matched, but it meant much more. The ancient scarab and its connection to rebirth and regeneration made perfect sense as a conceptual choice for Frankenstein. So it was more than just a beautiful necklace, which it is, but it had so many deeper layers of meaning that made it perfect for this project.
Yeah, it basically encapsulated everything about Elizabeth. Yeah. And I also, I learned from this just how amazing the articulation is in that piece, how it sits across and moves. I've never appreciated that in a way.
Yes, it fits, as you say, it fits her so perfectly. But you're not done. There was not just one look to this movie. The hits just keep on coming. And of course, in jewelry, I know everyone, when this came out, the malachite dress. I'm not even going to speak. Tell us about the malachite dress.
First camera test, I did a little bodice and she was running around in a purple skirt and Ugg boots. It was very unglamorous. But again, it's sort of finding different ways of using the language that we decided to use with her. And this was drawn up in-house, as were the X-rays, and then Gainsborough Silks actually wove this for us. So we did a few tests, and then you see, because Elizabeth has many fleeting images of woman. In the beginning of the film, it's Victor's story, so we see her through Victor's eyes. She's the mother, she's the Madonna, she's all these fleeting images, and when we go to the creature's story, she's reflecting the creature, and echoes his, physiology and world. But this was all sort of, playing with scale and using, really with that shawl that we did, which was based off fractal patterns to suggest a moth-like wing. All this language together was sort of to create this image that Guillermo had of her beetle-like quality. And so we did lots of tests like this and wove it in different variations. There's a picnic dress that you might remember from the film in yellow. It was another variation of this. So she's always transforming, just like a metamorphosis, really.
And we have her here. I have to say, I know many paintings were referenced by people working on the production, but the still photographer on the production made...
Ken Warrener.
Oh my gosh. So many of these images are like paintings. And here is your malachite dress, in action on Mia. And this scene is so incredible because, again, like some of you know,
they're real bugs, by the way.
The real bugs. Yeah, you could tell they were real bugs. Yeah, the insects that it was a society pursuit. This is legitimate society pursuit at the time to study bugs, entomology. It was really the reaction to the Industrial Revolution. It was that love of nature, and she is drawing her insects here. And wearing her malachite dress beautifully, this reclined, drawing. It's just like the drawing class with Christopher. I'm sure that's how everyone looks. They're all lounging in gowns of malachite. But there is a jewel here, and we're getting to it. And this is really...
So it's a beautiful meta overback ring. It's a gorgeous green tourmaline. The tourmaline would have been sourced in Maine, probably by George Kuntz. And, it just speaks to the naturalism that Tiffany embraced at that time. And that vivid green stone, it was just so beautiful.
The whole universe inside it.
Yeah, it has the inside had a kind of matrix that you could see when, and you told me something great. You said, well, many things. But when we were first starting off and, it was a conversation about maybe a necklace or two, you also did say to me, you said, if you bring something beautiful to Guillermo's set, he'll film it.
That's right, lollies.
lollies. Yeah, lollies. So we brought this lolly, which is a pretty beautiful.
It really is, and
ring.
also I mean, I've seen the movie a couple of times, but you can't really see the setting, but there is something in the setting that relates to the plot.
So throughout the film, you know, there's leaves. There's leaves blowing in every funeral scene. There's leaves throughout the tower. And of course, the leaf is a very symbolic gift from the creature to Elizabeth. And the naturalism of Tiffany, of course, is expressed in the setting of that ring. So we wanted to, I mean, just make that reference. And it made it truer, I think, for Mia as she was, you know,
Absolutely.
working on the
Mia
role.
gets very committed to the world of her character.
For
so.
sure.
Yeah,
And she loved the jewelry. I mean, it seemed to be something she...
Had to get that ring off her, remember?
But you said the ring fit her as well. I mean,
Yeah,
she
everything
was our
was really
Cinderella.
Everything fit. I mean, this was part of the problem, you guys. We haven't talked about this. It was real archival jewelry worn in the film. These pieces are not worn. We don't put them on people. We don't photograph them on celebrities. You know, every now and then maybe, you know, Lady Gaga will have a moment, and she does it very well. But I will say that typically when we loan jewelry for projects, it's not fragile archival jewelry that's over 100 years or more old. So, you know, having that huge beetle crawling over the ring was something
There were two.
There were two, and you know, we have a registrar, Courtney Zuzan. She was on set making sure everything was okay, but we're also responsible for these assets of our organization.
Well, and you also have to deal with the fact that, and a little shout out to the wonderful Jordan, who is our makeup designer on the film. He's here tonight. But you're dealing with, you know, hair and makeup. Everybody's in this world, and I know every time we all got stuck on, there was always this from the archives team.
You know, we took a risk. I mean, there can be no hairspray, okay? But the truth is that it's not done. You typically don't bring archival treasures, and that was part of what we had a kind of bond. We had a kind of sense of trust. Guillermo wanted authenticity. Real jewelry was important to him, and so
You had your own trailer.
What's that?
You had your own trailer.
The jewelry had its own trailer. But, you know, we had to arrive before talent, you know, let's not forget. So if the call is like 6 a.m., we were there at 5. So, you know.
So tell us about the Wade necklace in this moment.
Oh, my
That was a
goodness.
Cinderella moment, wasn't it?
It was.
We cried.
There have been a lot of tears on
Yeah.
this project. You know, it's a really
We
beautiful...
called it the month of tears, and then it became three. I
Yeah,
think.
it just kept going. Well, it was a very emotional project. The film is very emotional. It's charged with a lot of memory and emotion and feeling, and I think you get that when you watch the film. But there was this, you know, moment where the soiree scene where you had worked on this really beautiful gown. You were thinking about perhaps creating a Bertha at that time. But what we thought was, well, we've placed a necklace. You know, we'd already placed a necklace in the film, which was great.
And we saw the shot that Guillermo was doing, because
Yeah.
everything changes. You have to be able to, you know, there's what you pre-plan, and then 90% of what you're doing as you're in production is making it up
Yeah.
on the day and quick responses. So I think once we saw that set up and realized the shot, that kind of answered.
Yeah, but I want to say we had a week because I sent someone back to New York to go get it.
Oh, you did.
Yeah, and we had passed the point of no return. We were in deep. I mean, what started off as a couple pieces ended up being a full-on commitment, but I could see from what you were filming how extraordinary the film was, and we were so proud to be involved, and more so now, more than ever, knowing the response.
You did energize us, because especially when all these pieces happened further in the process, and we'd already been on this, I'd been on it a year already, and I had a crew that were fairly exhausted, although very committed. And then Tiffany walks in with a bit of fairy dust, and everyone goes, "Oh, amazing!" It was a bit like that. It did give an energy. It seriously did. I can't underestimate. You know, when Colio came to visit, we were talking about the. You know, he talked about the power of something. You know, it wasn't the light, and it was a totally, and that's how it felt when we put Mia in it, when we put it on the first time.
It fit her perfectly.
Yeah.
I mean, again, we were prepared with monofilament, or if we had to, And it fit her perfectly. I mean, the next slide will show you the detail of this piece.
It's true. And before
extraordinary.
I'm like, I'm
It's a
holding on to
Paulding
this.
Farnham piece. Oh, there's
I'm
something else
holding
to
on
say?
Yes.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
desperate to ask Kate because we drove. You too. About the feathers on the head, because they're so original and.
It came. There was a historical precedent that women did have these pieces that some people would look at in a modern context and go, "Oh my God, that's ridiculous." But this also came from, again, the angel motif. But I was looking at some of the symbolist painters, and there's these winged creatures, and that echoes the Medusa as well that we see. So everything's foreshadowing.
Yeah, because you had mentioned the Medusa to me briefly in DM, and I went down the rabbit hole
Transformation.
of the sleeping Medusa.
Yeah.
The sleeping Medusa is depicted in jewelry quite often in cameos in the 19th century, and it's when the wings, which are usually up when she's all snakes out, wings up, and it's when the wings are down when she is sleeping and vulnerable. And Guillermo, again, speaks about the Medusa is a misunderstood monster, and it's brought through, so I had to throw that one in here as well. But this necklace, I feel like if Tiffany hadn't designed it, Hollywood would have had to, because it is so textbook and perfect in every single way.
It's a beautiful, 1900 garland-style necklace designed by Paulding Farnham. This is the kind of jewelry that Tiffany was offering to the elite of the Gilded Age. And, it was something that we thought, let's try it. Let's just see what happens. And it was the light, the candlelight, the way Mia wore it.
Didn't dominate her either.
No.
That's always a thing to consider with all the elements. How much are you dominating the actress or the person? And it was the opposite.
And it's a well-known piece. It's been photographed. We've displayed it in many exhibitions. We'd never considered putting it on somebody before, and then really Kate came along.
Yeah, right.
Lollies, more lollies.
No,
All right.
wait, one other thing. I've heard so many stories. I've had the pleasure of spending time with both of you and hearing so many stories. You do have to tell the story about Christina being under the piano. I feel like I can backtrack.
So Christina Vignoni, who I mentioned before, the director of the Tiffany Archives, literally was under, Mia because, jewelry couldn't fall. We didn't, and the loss would be unthinkable. So, and in between every take, because she does play the piano.
There was a lot of people under that crinoline. There was
Yeah.
a lot. Stand by.
It looks perfect, Kate. So the truth is, but we had to make sure that it was all right. And in between every take, she made sure that each of those pear-shaped diamonds was perfectly placed.
It's really an incredible piece. And okay, we've gone Hollywood. So anyone who spends any time in Los Angeles knows that to have a billboard on Sunset Boulevard is really the pinnacle of an achievement. And here we are.
Yeah, I know we could keep going on for hours, but it's incredible to have a piece like this end up on the poster. And it really iconizes an already beautiful piece in a new way that gives a new context for the story of this jewel.
It's really true. I mean, those of us who have studied jewelry history, I've known this necklace since my entire career, since the 90s. And then to see what it's done, and now to see it flooding my feed on the internet, it's wonderful and wild.
Our friends at Netflix have been amazing, I'd like to
Yes.
mention, and again, Steve Newman has been so great about, sharing images and working with us on retouching, and I have to say it's been, Netflix has played a major role in the success of this project as well.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And then I feel like, there's parts to Frankenstein with the creature story and Victor's story, and we have the prelude with the captain and the ship, and this is kind of our intermission. We have the moment, which both of you have touched on, about being on set.
Yeah.
This is behind the scenes, Christopher with Mia in the necklace, and what it was like. And how long were you there?
That was Wilton House, wasn't it?
That was, no, this was Hospital Field House. It was strange because from day to day, you didn't know what was filmed tomorrow.
Right.
Like Guillermo liked to keep everyone on their toes. He's an extraordinary director. And I have to say that I couldn't believe when we showed up how welcomed we were on the set. I mean, Oscar Isaac could not have been more interested in the objects and wanted to know about them. And, you know, these were scenes he wasn't even appearing in. And yet he wanted to know, oh, what was that? And tell me about the year, and what's the construction, and what are the gemstones? So it was a very warm environment. Of course, Kate had already paved the way, but by the time we arrived on set, it was quite a collaborative experience. And thank you for allowing Tiffany to play such an active role in this.
I expect it all the time.
I'm like, I feel like Christopher's not telling me how long he was in Scotland. I was seeing all these pictures on Instagram.
Well, I had to come and go. You know, there was a point.
And
Here's Maguire,
who's
who's
here. If it
here.
wasn't you, it was Catherine running about.
I was invited to Oak Spring, Bunny Mellon's house, so I had to leave the set and go to Oak Spring, and you know, we got lost in the dark, and then I had to come back. And I had to, where's that garland-style necklace we
Set's
needed?
moved.
It was a commitment, let's just say.
It was a long process. I was seeing all these pictures on Instagram of Christopher with like Scottish castles, and I was thinking, I don't think Tiffany's opening a boutique there. What is going on? And I thought, if he wanted me to know, he would say, but it was all very top secret.
Couldn't talk about it.
Yeah, couldn't talk about it. So again, like you were saying, Kate, we have color and we have character, and it really changes. And I feel like saying, my God, do we have color here now that we have Claire, which is Victor, it's again Mia Goth, but Victor Frankenstein's mother. And can you talk to us about her red?
Well, you know, it's the very opening of the scene where you see her on the steps of this, we call it the cloud of blood, you know, coming from her head. And the red is the beginning of Guillermo's line, his visual line through the whole story. It's an incredibly important color, Guillermo's reds. He calls them pigeon blood and all of this. And it, you know, what you see is when she goes into labor, then the red blood stain of her hand is imprinted on her son, on Victor's back, and then that becomes his red gloves in the film. Then you see her effigy in the coffin surrounded by, you know, the red garland is echoed in Mia when she wears the red bonnet in Victor's apartment. So this red has a huge, it's hugely part of Guillermo's language. And with this scene, we were shooting in this dress that she's wearing. It's in the banqueting room or the hall of Wilton House. And the wall is full of mythological you know, paintings and characters and that. And it, again, this sort of world, we cheated back to the Age of Enlightenment, you know, an earlier period, more Mary Shelley's time. And this piece that you showed me was so perfect for that, wasn't it?
That's right. And you know, I think the next slide shows a little bit more about that piece. You know, it was a piece from 1877. This was from that original selection of objects that we showed you. It did feature this bacchanal design with the Dionysus head in the front and groups of grapes and, you know, amphorae, and yet the piece is carved lava stone, and it was incredibly fragile. And unlike the garland style diamond necklace, we just couldn't put this on an actor. It was far too fragile. So Rachel Basler from the Tiffany Jewelry Design Innovation Workshop worked on a new scanning device. It's a handheld blue light scanner. So she could actually capture in 3D each piece of this necklace so it could be recreated faithfully and worn by Mia in the film. And you know,
I just want to say that a certain person next to me also hand-painted the patina on it with his watercolors. He can be employed anytime.
But it was a way to use modern technology to express an 1877 piece in the film. And I think that there was something really beautiful about the inclusion of these neoclassical faces, knowing the film, or that the story is also called the modern Prometheus.
Well, it allowed us to, you know, still keep the idea of craft and that going. You know, we use technology in different ways as well, and ultimately it still comes down to the hand, but it allows you to keep the language that Guillermo's all about.
I've always been just so enchanted by this necklace, and you know, you mentioned that it was the lava necklace, and similar to the scarabs reflecting an interest and a pursuit of society or even popular culture headlines. The reason why we have lava jewelry at the 19th century is because Mount Vesuvius erupted again.
And when they were having the dark summer, or what do they call the summer of?
The summer of
Oh, the
blood, the
Indonesian,
blood rain, or the,
volcano.
yeah, it's
when
all
Byron and Shelley were.
That's
Byron
right.
and Shelley. Read the introduction to Frankenstein 1818, available now, bookstores near you. But the famed volcano erupted again, and in jewelry, this is reflected. This is the narrative that doesn't often get told on a larger scale about jewelry, and you'll see lava cameos and beautiful pieces. It's kind of rare. You don't see them often, but you see them. I've never seen a piece like this. And I'm just so thrilled that it was in the production. But it also, as you were saying, the classical, the mythological world. We had Dionysus, and then here we have Medusa in Victor's lab, and the moment with the creature. And here we have, again.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to spend too much time on this one, but
We're not locked in. The thing is, our storytelling is about the world that we're creating. So sometimes, people do go, oh, but that's not of that period, and that it doesn't matter. Does it fit the language of what we're doing?
Yes.
I did that even on Crimson Peak. I found sort of 1970s sort of Baroque jewelry and that we used, but it fitted the sort of qualities and tone of what we were doing. And this was all about the drops of blood.
Yeah.
And, the meat off the table, and
Yeah.
it was perfect, the choice.
So on Claire, you can see in your rendering the inclusion of the archaeological revival necklace, but you said to me, well, what else do you have? And so, I brought as much as I could,
Pockets.
So what I did is
That was in the last minute too.
You wanted rubies,
I know.
and I said, okay, well, I'm going to go to the Tiffany store at Harrods. I did, and so
It wasn't cheap though, going to the Tiffany store.
Well, and to that point, it really shows the role of a producer. And Miles Dale, the producer of the film, it's not easy to bring high-value merchandise to a film set. And it really does require the partnership and vision of a great producer like Miles. And he did clear the way for us to bring, this ring and earrings, which were not, let's just say that they added to the insurance paperwork.
I mean, I have to say, I've interviewed many costume designers and talked about film, and I think in jewelry, we're always sitting back and saying, oh, but why couldn't you do this, and why couldn't you do that? And I've had costume designers tell me, it's a lot of insurance, it's a lot of paperwork, it's a lot of, whatever. So when we actually see it, we celebrate it, because you can tell the difference.
And Guillermo's kind of a more is more guy,
Well, and
gracious.
at the same time on this set, you're not allowed to take pictures. You can't tell anyone where you are or what you're doing. But of course, I had a great dialogue with our president and CEO, Anthony LaDrew. And so I was, oh, I got some rubies in. Oh, I've got a diamond necklace in. And he wanted to know, like, what are you guys filming today? And so I was able to at least describe, what, because it was very abstract. No one had seen images, and everyone had to trust what we were doing in isolation.
I love this piece. This is one of my favorites.
This is really a bookend to where we started when Christopher...
It's another one of the early pieces that Christina selected. It's an 1870s mourning.
And it comes out.
Yeah, the pearl does. There's a pin on the inside. And it's, a beautiful piece, and you see it in the film. I mean, she wears it in 2 different scenes.
And again, we see Claire echoing Elizabeth. So we see the mirroring of that, mother and Elizabeth.
Yeah, and this is really, I mean, Kate, there are people on the internet that are talking about what...
the fabric?
Yes! How did you make the fabric flow?
We went through so much of everything. It was like, there were crepolines and organzas, and we did a lot of... we used printing techniques, we used marbling techniques in this film, we wove the fabric, we used all our textile, whatever we could pull out of the box, because it had to be unique to the world that Guillermo was creating. And, there's the shots in the film and the creation of the creature where Dan and Guillermo go from a very wide shot, and then suddenly you're inside the creature. And it feels like everything that's nature is sort of this wild, untamed, but sort of enlarged in this microscope. And, so it just sort of lent itself to all the other languages that we were creating. Once this established the language for the rest of the film, allowed the audience to know that this was a more operatic language. And so once you do that, it allows you it unlocks an answer somewhere else and somewhere else. And I have to credit a brilliant team that I had managed to gather for this, in terms of everyone, tailors, prop makers, cutters, but also, our textile and dye department. And you add that on to making a dress that can take a lot of time, and, all these pieces needed many, many people from different departments within the costume department to be, at some point there'd be 20 people on a dress trying to finish something. I laughed, but there was tears. But, it is, because when you're with Guillermo, it's always about, can we do more, can we do more? And we built, a lot of the background as well. And they're also part of his colour palette. They're not a separate thing. They're all part of the world building and language. So everything goes from small to big.
It's amazing. I mean, it's an unforgettable moment when we meet Claire and that scarf is blowing in the wind. And then we have dun dun dun.
Daddy.
Daddy. Leopold arrives and I'm going to drive by him.
We love Carls. We love him.
I'm wearing a pocket watch in honor of him, yes. And Christopher, what happened here?
Well, all the jewelry in the film is worn by Mia Goth, but we were past the point of no return. Kate said to me, "Do you have any pocket watches from the 19th century?" And I said, "Do I?" But then we had the opportunity when you said, "Well, there's a Frankenstein family crest," and I said, "Oh, let's start carving." So, but the truth is, we had a watch from the 1980s that had been built in a mid-19th century style, and we had it in the archives, and so we worked with our master engraver Tim Murphy to engrave the insignia that you had developed. Or Tamara.
With art department, and because we're always looking at what that's part of how we all work. We're always, on a practical level, if there's a crest in that we will use it. But it's all about language, and like even Tamara has a moss squad. So when Elizabeth's wearing her green marbled dress coming outside of the tower, and we had that brilliant green on the grass and then the velvet, Tamara went round with her moss squad crew, and put moss in the tower facade to match the colours that we were doing within the dress and in the landscape.
Wow.
Which is
the detail is extraordinary. And the layers, yes, exactly. Applause for this moment.
The whole team.
And I mean, it's almost impossible to believe that this is a photograph, because it really does look like a painting. And of course, a wedding dress is a high point of anything, but it's certainly in a movie, and it means so much. And if anyone is writing a PhD dissertation, I suggest you just take this one scene, because we could go deep and we could go long, but we're going to focus.
I talked to someone who wore a black cotton dress for $30 when I got married. It's like,
so still, this is amazing, and if you watch this scene, there is a lot more happening than might appear once Elizabeth gets up from her dressing table. But she is holding our leaf, and underneath the leaf is the Wade necklace, and it's kind of an assemblage of all the jewelry just for a moment in the scene. But what we're going to focus on first is the silver, what do you call them, brooches? What are you calling them?
They're sort of brooches in terms of the family crest. Yeah. And it comes from a Swiss Germanic folklore, folk dress tradition. So I think that goes back to the 18th century for sure. And there was some artwork on banners and things, because we're talking about this feeling of taking the past always with you, which is seen in the way Victor treats the creature. But also, this is a man who carries around his mother's bed, like this, And so that idea of family always sort of being there, sort of the weight and burden of it, and even with the chains, but also as part of the whole image of the dress echoing the creature.
Right.
So how we first see him.
And then the woman from Bern, the painting,
I just translated it into a wedding dress idea.
It's just amazing. And then, because Kate did design these pieces,
Yeah.
working with the Tiffany studio.
Yeah, the Jewelry Design Innovation Workshop at Tiffany, and they do extraordinary work. And Kate met with them and showed them drawings, and they developed these pieces. We tried different scales of them. There are diamonds in the eyes of the creatures.
It's also about light and movement.
Yes,
you know, that was important. And also there's a slight concave, is that the word? There's a slight curve on the brooch.
There's a
It's got to fit
complex
over the
curve. It
bodice.
curves in both directions so that the light captures it both ways. But, you know, when we heard there was a wedding scene, like I said, I thought, oh, that's normally, you know, what we're interested in at Tiffany. Of course, you read the script, it's like, I don't know.
Change.
That one doesn't work out that well. But, you know, still, you know, Tiffany has a long tradition of extraordinary work in sterling silver, and so we wanted to create these as well.
They're so beautiful, and I don't think people are really actually onto the fact that they are part of the Tiffany suite of things that are in the movie. And can you just tell me what the figures are? Because I feel like I'm looking at...
One's a swan and one's a griffin.
That's what I thought, yeah. Beautiful. And these secretly snuck on set.
Yeah. Well,
how could you not? More lollies.
This was part of the "what else do you have" conversation. Well, you know, I mean, and again, it was the wedding, you know, the vanity table, and so, you know, you had suggested, you said, what, you know,
part
perhaps
of her world, you know?
Right, and so we were, you know, at first I thought, is there room for like a small, you know, a pony Tiffany lamp? Like I didn't know what would work, but the sort of hardness of the light on the sterling silver matched the sterling silver brooches that she wears on the wedding gown. And so we included a couple fragrance vials, a vinaigrette, a jewelry box, and of course our favorite little frog dish.
Yeah.
And I asked Kate, why do you want the frog? Tell them.
Well, because it's the frog princess, isn't it?
That's right.
Because the creature becomes a
Aww.
prince. That's a geeky thing. Like, honestly, it's just my 5-year-old sentimental self coming through there. You know. Somewhere in my childhood it came through.
So I mean, it's actually, I mean, I think it's kind of panned over in the movie, but there's some outlaw images on the internet where you can actually see even a couple of pieces of jewelry that we couldn't even include this evening, where she was.
Oh yeah, there's pins on the back of her soiree gown, all those beautiful diamonds.
There's some other rings that she wears when she's playing the
and
piano.
the gold bracelets when she's playing.
You never know what's going to end up in the film. That's why I brought more, because sometimes, well, scenes get cut.
And we
views
move
get
things
cut.
around. Once we see the shot, we're going, oh, quick, let's just like, we moved the weight necklace, didn't we, when they were doing that very dressing
We
scene.
moved the lighting.
Oh my God, can I just tell you, Christopher in the early days sent me this talk with you and him talking about the Medusa, and I lost my shit because, and for months I kept going, how can I get this in the film? You know, because it represents everything about Victor, the sort of, you know, all the qualities and images of the film, all the layers that Guillermo had, and it's almost Guillermo. I mean, you know, here's a Chihulu creature in front of me, and everything about it, the wild organic quality felt. It really was, we were trying to find a place for even Victor to have this, him being the dandy and this wild sort of bohemian, and I'm sure if Nureyev had seen it in his Parisian apartment, he would have worn it. You know, we couldn't, but for us it's the thing that I held on to a lot as an image of the world that we were creating in some ways. You know?
I also feel like it's such a full circle moment for us, Marion. You know, 2 years ago we were on this stage talking about this piece. And, you know, I also applaud the efforts of the 92nd Street Y hosting these talks so that we can, you know, focus on these subjects, you know, especially with Jewelry Week and talking about, you know, the use of jewelry in such an amazing
and the muse, the idea of the muse is such a big thing. You know, Victor's pursuing his muse, building this creature, and I think all of us, Guillermo's such a champion of art. Every time you look at a frame in the film, there's hundreds of artists and craftsmen behind every image, every frame, and I think we all, you know, want to find that moment in our work.
Yeah, yeah. It's for.
So if I can, you know, the Medusa was also a way north for us because as Kate was researching the film, I showed her the video of our talk here, now we're here talking about what you did with it. But it also was a really important source of inspiration. This piece,
Hugely.
of course, designed by Louis Tiffany with Julia Munson on it, but it also helped guide a very important piece of jewelry, the last one we're going to talk about tonight, that needed to be created for the film.
It's true, and I just want to, if we're kind of assuming you were all here in 2023 with us on stage, but we did Christopher and I and Nani Frelinghauser from the Metropolitan Museum of Art did a talk about this piece, the Medusa, which has really been like a holy grail for many dealers. Who I spoke about, and I wrote a story about it at the encouragement of Christopher, because he had just acquired the piece, and he just excited me about all the details of the history, and I wrote it, and then Jonathan said, oh, you should do a talk about the Medusa at the Y, and I said, a talk about one piece of jewelry?
Yeah.
And we did, so that's where we're gonna follow up with that now. This is a real bookend to the bookend. And this is another piece that Kate, you designed working with Christopher, which we've had. Elizabeth has worn this throughout the entire movie.
Absolutely.
And she even holds it at one point very close to her. It's very important. This is a movie about creation, consequence, acting the part of God. So the cross is very important. And shall I move to?
I think we have to.
Oh, we want to move to the next.
Well, I don't know. Do you want to talk a little bit about, I know Guillermo had a strong view about
Yeah,
Elizabeth
he always
having
wanted a
cross.
crucifix for her, and we, not sure if we're meant to talk about this, but we had whole scenes that we shot of her in the convent, where she starts as a place to, and she mentions it in the bistro scene, that she found it as a place to be, to have freedom to explore stuff, and in that, again, in the bistro, I mentioned it before, she has the book of William Paley's Theology of Nature, and at the heart of it, we have this piece of the scarab, and the colour that we chose. This is all part of Guillermo's language. It's the motif of red coming through the whole film.
And then you went into the archives.
Oh yeah, can I just, the archives, even the journey to the archives, that day I went out was like, you get in the car and then you go through all these woods and then there's a big vaulted door and in the door there's another. It wasn't quite like that, but it.
Don't tell them where it is.
No. It's a long journey. But also, we didn't just see physical jewels, but there's all the beautiful drawings and notebooks and other, there's all these crosses. And, Guillermo said he wanted a crucifix for her, and we'd even explored doing the embroidery pieces of the prayer crucifixes. And then, obviously in a practical way, and it felt like it needed to be a piece of jewelry that matched her station. And we kind of Frankensteined a whole lot of pieces, and I really loved the simplicity and shape. That it wasn't just a decorative piece, that it felt like it had all the themes and simplicity of her too. And this piece here, the black with the purple, I really loved, and I got quite obsessed with the claws.
Yeah,
And then we sort of explored various imagery, but then the image that really unlocked and inspired everything, it was again Meta Overbeck. Her drawings are so exquisite. And this little piece, this medallion with the scarab in the middle, this drawing, it fitted perfectly in the centre when we started playing and just sort of drawing with layers. So it manifested itself as the heart of the whole crucifix, of the cross.
And Christopher put together one of his animations for us, which we had for the Medusa, and he's going to walk us through this.
This is for the cross. So the idea that Kate was inspired by the world of Meta Overbeck was very important to us.
We had the blue scarab.
Yeah, so we looked at the blue scarab, and Tiffany committed to building the cross for you. Marie Fauvel, magical jeweler at Tiffany, was assigned the project to work closely with Kate, and through the complex combination of materials that were authentic to Meta Overbeck's time, were assembled in a very special order. In this very, this was like a very elaborate puzzle that had to come together for this piece.
A wonderful gemologist, Vicky.
Victoria Worth
When
Reynolds.
he talked about her going, I've got my gemologist, I imagine someone wearing Yves Saint Laurent climbing up a mountain like Indiana Jones.
Yes.
Wasn't quite like that.
Well, and it was Vicky who sourced the carnelian body as well as the garnet, which we had carved as the scarab in the center of this.
And that color went back and forth a lot. Didn't
Yeah,
it? Trying
that's
to get the
right.
tone.
So here you're looking at the 18-karat framework that that houses the carnelian that was drilled with holes to hold those 6 8-prong settings that were so important to
And
you.
the classic Louis Comfort golden balls.
Yes, yes, the milk grain is
Part of it.
there, but it was really about the attention to detail and that kind of Tiffany craftsmanship that is still alive today.
Yeah.
And so we were able to really focus on creating something just the way Meta Overbeck would have, and that central scarab, of course, being such an important symbol, was framed by this vitreous enamel work that held it all together. The garnets and rubies that accent the piece, I think, really bring this cross together in a way that I hope Louis Tiffany and Meta Overbeck would have been proud. We, yeah. And as a finishing touch, like the Medusa, which Louis Tiffany signed on the back, this cross was hand engraved by George Peros, also engraver at Tiffany, and we decided to engrave Elizabeth's name on the back of the piece so that it would always be known as Elizabeth's cross. And that the artwork for that Elizabeth came from a very special source. It came from Mary Shelley's original manuscript of Frankenstein.
We went deep geek.
And for those of you who were here in 2023, with Christopher and I on the Medusa talk, you'll recall that the back of the Medusa is signed in a kind of a similar script, but the handwriting is Louis C. Tiffany, and it says underneath it, artist. So that's where this came from, right?
Yeah, and we, it was something that you don't see in the film, but we know it's there, and Mia knew it's there. And I think that handcraft is what is so incredibly important to Guillermo. He talks about it.
And he's a man that will, finesse the tiniest details of books. Victor's medical kit with all the beautiful bottles and that. It's all part of what he's championing.
And that's why Tiffany wanted to work on the project, because we could see we could contribute in a very meaningful way and not just place nice-looking jewelry in a film.
And here's the full look, and as I say, someone please write a dissertation about just this scene, because it's so incredible, and we're really running late. I am aware of the hour. I just want to mention briefly, of course, the bandages on the arms and the references back to the Boris Karloff Bride of Frankenstein. And again, we're looking at floating fabrics, which Kate isn't quite revealing what she's doing behind this.
Silk crepeline, okay. And others.
And she has on her brooches with her chains and her crucifix. And that is the bookend on Elizabeth. And I think that, and these are Christopher's windows worked on
Stunning.
with Guillermo del Toro. And
Can I just say too that when you saw them, it felt like he directly translated all the language of what we were doing on the film. And Guillermo turned to me and he said, "This man is a genius."
Oh.
So I have to say that.
It takes one to know one, Kate.
And I think you can all see now that this just isn't jewelry being put on with a dress. This is jewelry as storytelling, which I think is something that we all that love jewelry dream about. And this is why we love Frankenstein. So we thank you both so much. Because this is such a special evening, and we have Kate, who is here from New Zealand and has been to Los Angeles, and her last moderator, I might add, was Margot Robbie. But here I am.
Don't ask me acting questions.
But if anyone did want to ask a few questions, I know it's late. If people have to run, we're not wounded. But if anyone wanted to ask a question, I can't see a thing.
There's a hand here.
Go ahead. Scream out.
Hi.
I just wanted to say one thing and then ask a question. So the first thing is, I
Yeah.
My question for both you and Christopher is, were you guys able to count for how many total pieces of both Tiffany jewelry and Tiffany objects in the movie in total?
Yeah, there are 27.
27.
Yeah, which is a lot.
We would have been doing an all-nighter if we went through everything, so I'm sorry we couldn't. Yeah. Anyone else want to? I can't see a person. Oh, Neil Lane, right up front.
Oh, you're infamous, aren't you?
You're allowed to ask a brief question. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Great. This was really amazing. Thank you all for the amazing question. So the scarab necklace is fabulously gorgeous, but the headdress is fabulously colorful and wonderful. Which came first?
Do you know what? In this world, everything happens all at once. You know, I don't. It's like this game. That's what happens with the way I work. That is some of it. We had vintage pieces that were dyed in house by my alchemist dyers. That's how we achieve the color. They're brilliant. Yeah.
All right. I feel like this is the latest late night talk. It's
See a hand
gothic.
here
Oh,
behind
okay.
Neil.
Behind Neil. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Catherine. I just commented on your Instagram post.
I can't keep up.
So I work with clothing history professionally, and I hear you say a lot, you know, we took accuracy and then we went away from that. But I often describe a lot of your pieces to my friends as historically plausible, because there are things that I would not be surprised to see in a museum collections building.
Oh.
Is there anything that surprised you that you found in your research that you thought that doesn't look like something that would exist? But it did?
Do you know what? I would take this back to even the 18th century. There's a book by Barbara, I can't remember her name, but it's a facsimile of all the, she made dresses for women in the 18th century, and she kept little bits of fabric samples, wrote how many yards, all of that, but the fabrics always blew me away. And I think sometimes you can look through pieces and they, you know, it was very much a personal statement. They didn't have mass fashion, but you can look at some of the textiles and go, if you put it in a modern world, you would totally believe that that was a contemporary fabric. I'm always surprised by the past in every way. Jewelry, the minute you do the research and you see what individuals were creating, you understand that some things can transcend any time period. So I'm always surprised by that. And often I like to play with something that's there and just elevate it or heighten it. And people go, really, is that part of it? And it's just part of it's where research equals what you're trying to describe in the work that you're doing.
Amazing. Hi, in the front.
My name is Karen. I'm actually in the process of recreating the wedding dress.
Oh.
I compete with costuming, and so I just want to thank you both for creating one of the most stunning, beautiful pieces I've ever seen in my entire life.
Well, I had an amazing team behind me, for sure.
Exquisite. I had a question about the crucifix.
Yes.
Did you choose carnelian because of its association with love?
All of that comes into it, and then it was because we spent ages also trying to find the right colour and tone.
Yeah, we tried banded agate. We looked at jasper. We tried enamel. You know, just for the there was a semi-translucence also to the carnelian. It was also appropriate for the period. So I think
What often happens when you're hitting things that you're trying to solve, challenges, often the right answer happens and then it unlocks all the other answers, and that happens on every way through meaning. And that often Guillermo, he would say this about the casting of Jacob at the time. You couldn't have thought of anything more devastating than losing a lead actor 9 weeks before shoot starts, and then Jacob appears. And he's perfection. But it was a gift. And Guillermo always looks at this, he's always saying, he's a seasoned enough filmmaker, whatever there's, something like this happens, it's the right reason, and there's something right for the movie that will come out of it. And I think, or you have to grow some hairy balls.
But I think, Christopher, could you also mention what the beads on the necklace are made of? Because a lot of people online have been saying that they're coral, and of course they're not.
I mean, they were designed to be coral, but at Tiffany we don't work with coral. We of course protect the oceans, and that's something that we have a serious commitment to. And so we found vintage porcelain that was I think from Czechoslovakia, former Czech Republic, and we used those. But I think that you're talking about the importance of the carnelian and its meaning. Stones have energy.
Totally.
And that's, I think, the use of radiating that energy in the film using real material, I think, is why we were so committed to doing it.
It is 9:30.
Thank you. Thank you.